Hi, Mickey.
Hey, Bob.
Mickey, you're recording. You look. Things look dark there. You look as if you've got It's dark.
It's dark,
yes.
Bob. Jonah Goldberg said, "I'm in a dark place. I'm a dark character."
Oh, did he?
And it is dark. It is dark on his podcast, one of his many podcasts.
You're in a dark place.
So it's bad because events are conspiring to destroy the life of the one person I care about most.
And that would be me? Oh, you.
Because I had thought, Biden was in a terrible place. The Democrats were going to lose Congress. I wouldn't have to worry anymore about them passing the two things I hate, an amnesty bill and a refundable child tax credit. But no, the Democrats are regaining ground in the congressional race. Some of the generic polls are equal, not in the swing states, but still it's a start. And Trump is going to enter the race and screw it all up for the Democrats. So the Democrats might retain Congress. They're already passing amnesties right and left, little bitty ones. They're going to be desperate for Latino votes. The only thing they know how to do to shore up their support among Latino votes is push for an immigration amnesty, even though Latinos don't care that much about it. But they're going to do that. And Mitt Romney is, having conferences all over Washington about his tax credit proposal for families. And after Roe, Republicans have to show they care about families, which is fine. Romney's plan is fine, but because it has a work requirement. But the first thing the Democrats are going to do in negotiations is say, okay, let's loosen this work requirement. So it's setting us on a path to disaster, and it means we're going to have at least 2 more years of having to defend against this stuff, meaning Mickey can't catch a break.
Mickey, it sounds like you're in a dark place.
I'm in a dark, dark place.
Let's quickly explain.
Jonah only scratched the surface of the darkness.
I want to quickly explain the Jonah Goldberg reference. So I taped a podcast with Jonah that I haven't aired yet, and you joined us partway through, and I gather that Jonah then did a podcast where he talked about the conversation we had with him that hasn't been aired yet. And I haven't listened to what he said yet. I'll listen to it before we tape the Parrot Room, and then we will discuss it in the Parrot Room. But I gather he said unflattering things about either you or you and me or something.
Yeah. Yes, you gathered right. But anyway, we'll talk about it in the Parrot Room. That's what the Parrot Room is for.
Yeah, for working people
airing of grievances.
Yeah. It's funny, Mickey. People think of the Parrot Room as this nice place. People come, they have pina coladas, wonderful time. By and large, that's true. But when you have a troublemaker, there's a reason there are bouncers, and there's a reason that sometimes you take somebody in the back room at the Parrot Room and work them over. And I haven't listened to what Jonah said, but I'm just not saying that fate will not befall him in the Parrot Room, if you know what I'm saying.
It's not that bad, but anyway, we can talk about it.
The other thing I should say quickly, okay, well, first, that conversation is one in a series I'm having with old-time blogging heads to kind of mark the rebranding of all of this from blogging heads to non-zero, which it is now. Also, we should say, Mickey, that next week, I think this is maybe a first for years that we're not going to have a podcast. There was once when you were sick and I did it alone, but since we started doing them in the COVID era, I don't think we've missed one.
Well, anyway, there was a time I had food poisoning in Tulsa. That was only a couple of months ago.
Yeah, but I did a podcast solo. Yeah. That's not going to happen next week, and I take full responsibility. I'm going to be at a family reunion, and as luck would have it, the 3 siblings who voted for Trump will be there. The one who didn't won't. So, doing that instead of this podcast is kind of like, jumping whatever it is out of the pot and into the fire, whatever the metaphor is. I just can't catch a break. So I take full responsibility. We'll be back the following week. There won't be a Parrot Room next week. So if I were you, I'd sign up and enjoy this week's, but it's up to you. So you're, I don't know. Are you just making this shit up? Yeah.
I'm exaggerating for effect, but in fact, the Democrats have gained. Everybody has noticed it. It's not just me. And it's generally attributable to Roe and the reaction of pro-abortion people in defending Roe and mobilizing, and also the reaction of the anti-abortion people in sort of pushing what most voters consider extreme proposals, and thereby making people wonder, what are the Republicans going to do if they're in power? And it's bad enough that Kevin McCarthy has a vacuum for a platform, right? So that he has nothing to say. But it's even worse if they have something to say that voters don't like, which is we're going to pass there's talk about a national abortion ban. That's really going nowhere, but the talk is out there. And at the state level, there are other more extreme proposals in a few states, but the media amplifies them. And people who believe in abortion rights are rightly worried that, what happens if we put the Republicans back in power. So that's even before, Trump throws his hat in the ring and screws up everything. Now, the positive side is that there is a bunch of evidence, and Michael Barone goes over it in his column this week, that Trump really is fading. I mean, even if it's like from 40% to 30%, there are polls in states that would still beat the field at the moment, but there are polls in states showing DeSantis tying with him, coming very close. It's not just New Hampshire. He beats him decisively in Florida, which is where people really know both of them the best.
It's also one of them's home state, so it's
it's both of them's home state. But Trump hasn't been.
Well,
Trump
yes and no. I mean, Trump's thought of as a New Yorker, and he's not governor of Florida. But anyway,
yes, but with those caveats, still. Anyway, so it's possible that this will not boost Trump, but it's definitely going to screw up the Republicans running for the House, and they're sort of cruising along, not really worried, and it seems like a disastrous posture. I thought the crazy idea would be DeSantis should declare. If Trump declares before the midterms, DeSantis should declare before the midterms. That would at least muddy the field and hold out hope to voters that it's not all about Trump. That if they vote Republicans into the Congress, it's not just going to be a red carpet for Trump to walk into the White House and do what he wants.
Yeah.
There's a good.
Well, is your view that the problem with Trump announcing is he drives Democratic turnout up?
There's that, and also the election is now about inflation, crime, wokeness, the chaos at the border, and then it becomes about Trump.
Yeah.
The Republicans have 4 or 5 winning issues if they just press them, and why introduce a losing issue, a big losing issue that will gobble up the media space? The whole point of him entering is that he wants attention. He wants to take a chunk of the media space. So he'll get it. The press will be happy to give it to him.
And the January 6th committee, in its infinite political wisdom, is suspending operations for August, but is vowing to come back with more in September. So just about at the perfect time to bring more of this stuff out. Did you watch this week's episode?
I didn't watch it. I saw a few of the highlights. I read the 6 dramatic moments. I'm afraid I agree with Jonathan Turley, which is they've discredited him as a president. He should never be president again. He committed an impeachable offense, but they haven't provided the link that shows he sent the violent demonstrators to the Capitol in order to commit violence and obstruct the congressional proceeding. I mean, that's the easiest charge.
Well, but it's increasingly.
So they haven't made the criminal case.
But it's increasingly clear. Well, a criminal case has an incredibly high bar. But if the question is,
right,
was he trying to obstruct the congressional proceeding, which is no ordinary congressional proceeding, by the way, it's more and more clear that the answer is yes.
He wanted to go to the Capitol. What did he want to do there? We still don't know.
Well,
was he going there to obstruct, or was he going into the lobby and pressure?
Well, let me just let me.
I don't think he knows.
Let me. Okay. We didn't learn that much this week. Maybe not much at all. But it's falling into place more and more for me. Now, last week I said that really strangely, for the first time, it had dawned on me that what he was doing in the White House while they were rampaging through the Capitol, and he was refusing to send out any communication that might stop that, it dawned on me that he actually still, at that point, was trying to derail the thing in hopes that he could remain president. He had not given up, even though he knew he hadn't sold Pence on the deal.
True.
Right. Well, but you say it's true, but it's not case closed true. Well, it's hard to establish intent. I'm saying it seems like every hearing we see a little more that nails that down. And so, for example, this week, maybe we knew this already, but so he goes into the White House and he holds himself up in the dining room. So first of all, we now know he had been told they breached the, long before he sent the Mike Pence tweet that there's now more evidence, by the way, it actually did kind of incite the crowd. They now have people, they're more aware of how individual people associated with that responded to the tweet. But before he sent that, we now know for sure, yes, he was sitting there watching Fox TV. We know what was on Fox TV at that point. Yes, he had been told they breached the Capitol. Now, interestingly, what was he doing with his time when in the dining room? He wasn't calling any authorities who might help bring it under control. He got a list of senators that he wanted to call.
Right. Now, the list of senators is not the list of oath keepers. The list of senators he meant to lobby senators pursue his crazy plan to, have people object to the electors. That is not calling the oath keepers and saying, you rough these people up until they agree. Which
I understand.
Would be the smoking gun.
Can I finish? I understand.
I'm interrupting for like a second while you're in a tirade. Okay,
no, but I hadn't gotten to my point. I know they do not have a criminal seditious conspiracy case, that reaches the way you need in criminal court. Now, I increasingly have no doubt at all that if they had all the communications between him and Bannon, him and Rudy, they'd have it. I think. But they don't, and they probably won't. But the point we have spent a lot of time talking about his state of mind. What was he thinking when he sent that tweet? Okay. And when you and I talked about it the first time around, more than a year ago, it was like we were speculating. Did he have the TV on? Blah, blah. We know a lot more. He knew exactly what was going on. How did he choose to spend his time? Calling senators. Now, we don't have much detail on that because no logs were kept. But apparently, we do know that he called Tommy Tuberville. And Tuberville apparently kind of said, look, we're kind of in a bad situation here. Could we talk later? He was sitting there like in fear of his life, basically. But interestingly, another person he called was Rudy. Later that evening, before the certification vote has happened, still hasn't happened. Okay.
Right.
Rudy calls Tuberville, and because Rudy is, such a klutz and probably drunk half the time, he calls the wrong number, leaves a message that we have because he called the wrong number. And the message is, can we slow this process down? So Rudy, who has talked to Trump during the critical time that we're talking about, when Trump is like, sending tweets out and stuff, calls Tuberville, same guy Trump called and wanted to talk to. And now Rudy says, can we slow this down? All I'm saying is that it is a totally reasonable inference that when Trump was sitting there in the dining room and preparing to send out that tweet that basically riled people up against Mike Pence, he was still planning to derail the process, slow it down as much as he could. I think to deny that a goal of the tweet was to amp up the intensity and thereby obstruct things and maybe physically intimidate Pence and so on, to deny that was what he was up to would take a lot of denial, right? And there's just more and more pieces making it harder to say that he was not trying to use physical coercion, physical violence to derail the constitutionally ordained process for electing the president. Now, to get a criminal case, you'd have to have those phone calls where he's planning the thing out with Bannon in advance, which I think he did. But it's just, I'm just saying, it's more and more mind-blowing to me that this guy was president. I just can't believe it.
It's pretty mind-blowing. I wouldn't put it past him. I just don't. I'm not completely convinced. I mean, sure, he's Trump. He wants the threat of violence. But was he smart enough in coherent enough in that situation where, assuming it wasn't planned in advance, to think, okay, I'll have the thugs are in there and they'll physically intimidate. That sort of contradicts what his strategy of going to the Hill, because they were going to spare him with the violence. He was going to lead them on like Joan of Arc or something, or
that had failed. That had failed. That I'm talking about what he was planning. Given that hadn't worked, what's he thinking?
So he's on the fallback plan, but he's
right. And the fallback plan is
still calling senators.
Exactly.
Trying to delay.
He's working along.
The key point is the violence. The key point you have to show is the violence. And do we know? Not that it's certainly implausible. Do we know that he knew how much violence there was inside, which wasn't a whole lot, but did have Pence's security people calling their families to say their final goodbyes. So they were rationally scared that, and it might have happened if they'd broken in, they might have killed people. But did Trump know how far they'd gotten, or did he just tweet out a tweet that happened, an incredibly offensive tweet that happened to land at exactly the wrong time? Oh, that's what they didn't show.
There's no way. Look, he's watching Fox TV. He knew there was an unruly and in some cases, no doubt, bloodthirsty mob. And there's now more and more. We actually have them on tape, to that effect. He knew that. Of course, he knew that. And, you have that.
The Fox. You're right. I forgot about the Fox.
You have the separate thing from Cassidy Hutchinson reporting that it's a conversation between, what's his name? Is it Cipollone, whatever and the guy and somebody else. They're both lawyers, I think, for the White House. And one of them says, you heard him. He thinks Mike deserves it. And that's in the context of hang Mike Pence. Okay. So right. You heard Trump. I don't know exactly when that happens. It's just, look, it's a little piece of evidence kind of every week, but I am just now, this thing that had only dawned on me way later than it should have, which is that he was still, you got a mob rampaging through the Capitol, and he sees it as a feature, not a bug, and he wants to use it to derail this process. You really should reflect on that. That is amazing.
There's not a tweet saying directing people or any communication directing people to use the violence. He was just happy to see it happen. We know that.
Obviously, he can't do that. It's a public communication. He can't publicly exhort them to commit the violence.
The whole idea of the commission is that it gets. The whole idea of the commission is it will get to public and private. It's an investigative commission. They subpoenaed people. They got all sorts of private stuff, and they haven't come up with that killer bit of evidence. Now, no, you're right. I think Bannon probably would hold it, and Trump is smart enough not to.
By the way, Bannon was convicted. Bannon was convicted of contempt for Congress.
I know that.
That could be in an ideal world, I think that would be 2 years in prison, because it's a max of one for each count, and they could be served consecutively.
I see him as sort of the Susan McDougal of this scandal, which is he's the person who goes to jail rather than blow the whistle on the whole thing. Although he may have a whole lot more evidence than Susan McDougal had. But he'll just go to prison. He'll go to jail. Now, that might not be very pleasant for him. So
he probably won't go for long. I doubt they'll sentence him for long. But and look, I'm sure he's thinking anything up to a few months is a good thing for me. It turns him into more of an icon. But after a few months, it's kind of becomes a high price to pay. Yeah.
Anyways, I think there is a lot of pressure. You say they haven't met the high bar of the criminal case. There's a lot of pressure to charge him. There was an op-ed by Richard Benvenisti, who is sort of important in, I've learned, in the formulation of the Democratic talking points. He sort of has a wide network, and people talk to him and saying, Merrick Garland, you only have so much time. Better make up your mind. And that was sort of a goad to him to do it or don't do it, but obviously to do it. I think while Cheney has accomplished a lot in terms of tarring Trump for the reasons you say, I think she still holds out the hope that he might be charged. I guess on the theory that the practical reason would be it would take him out of the presidential race, but it wouldn't. He could run from jail. So
well, he wouldn't be in jail. I mean, you mean he right now, I don't think there's much chance he gets convicted. I just listened to this New York Times podcast with one of the lawyers on the Mueller committee, explaining how hard it is to convict. I mean, while listening to that I thought, well, if they had the communication with Bannon, they could get him on seditious conspiracy, but they don't. They won't. I mean, the record probably doesn't exist, and Bannon's not talking. So I still think, by the way, Bannon, I've been saying all along, Bannon is the epicenter. I mean, honestly, he's the guy without whom this might not have happened. And, you know, this audio thing that came out and they made a big deal of, where Bannon says in advance of the election, you know, look, we're just gonna, you know, we're gonna focus, we're gonna say basically that the mail-in ballots don't count. Trump's gonna declare victory. I don't know if this audio came from his podcast, but I remember I heard that on his podcast months before the election, and I told you on this podcast, like, that's the plan. They're going to delegitimize the mail-in ballots. And Bannon, I honestly think more than anybody else, he thought this whole thing up, and he's also just the key node of synergy and getting various people organized and getting the talking points out to the grassroots, mobilizing them. And you know, on that Errol Morris documentary about him, he says there's going to be a revolution. He doesn't seem very unhappy about it. I honestly think he was planning, you know, that if necessary, we'll turn this into a revolution. We'll violently overthrow the government. I mean, he's game.
He's been calling for a revolution for years, and it's never been clear exactly what he means.
It's clear now.
He's also been flirting with guns for years, and it's never clear to me what he wanted to use them for.
What do you mean flirting with guns?
I mean, he you know, if you hung around him, you know, he knows people who have firearms, and, you know, he likes firearms, and he's always talking about it'll be good to get my hands back on my weapons. He's constantly making, you know, firearms references.
Well, he uses it metaphorically sometimes.
He's gun adjacent. He's gun adjacent. But it takes a lot more than a few guns to overthrow the United States government. And I just want to, conceding everything you say, including the part about it being hard to make a criminal case without the smoking gun tweet or Bannon. Imagine what it would be like if the shoe was on the other foot. In other words, if Trump had eked out a victory that the Biden people considered questionable, they wouldn't have stormed the Capitol that day, I don't think, because I don't think they had a Steve Bannon urging them, but there would have been more violence over the long term, prolonged violence, a little bit here, a little bit there, building, never going away, until the next election. I think the left would have gone berserk. And the right, you know, it's the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys. Those are two discrete groups with a discrete following. They may well be plotting a comeback and plotting more violence, but with the left, it's I think many more people.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, one interesting question is, would the left have gotten as riled up in a comparable situation?
I mean, they would have thought the system is stacked against them. They have no recourse but to violence.
Okay, but my question is, if the situation were comparable in the sense that there was a total lack of evidence to support them, right? I mean, if you were interested in getting to the truth of the Trump thing, it becomes clear, as any number of people, including Bill Barr, said, is he doesn't have a leg to stand on. The lawyers rarely in court even claimed any fraud, and they got shot down if they did. And you know, if you actually looked into things like at the State Farm Arena, it became clear that it's all bullshit. Do you think the left is as manipulable? And I'm not sure. As the right was.
There's the Ohio precedent. What happened in Ohio in with the Kerry election, where I believe there were people who said Ohio was stolen on the basis of exit polls that showed Kerry ahead, and they persisted. I think some people even voted to deny the electors in the Kerry race. And there, you know, and then the claims about the election polls were disproved by a genius left-wing blogger named Febble, who wrote a long post sort of saying why the exit polls were biased. And basically, old Republican voters, they see a guy with a floppy hat and an orange vest taking questions at the polls. They don't want to talk to him. So there's selection bias in terms of who answers the exit poll. But the Democrats were capable of spinning a whole lot out of these exit polls.
Okay,
so,
but I would say
there would be things.
That was a case where one state would have made the difference, right? Ohio would have made the difference, as I recall. Ohio alone.
So, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So in that sense, it was a much easier moment to seize in principle because you just got to argue that in this one case there's fraud. In this case, you had to hit the trifecta. You got to get 3 states. There's no good evidence in any of them, and yet we almost had a revolution.
This is a hypothetical case I'm making. I can stack the hypothetical ever on. Suppose it did come down to one state, that Trump won by one state.
Okay, but Mickey, Ohio's not hypothetical. That actually happened. Remind me of when they stormed the Capitol that year. They didn't. No, because they hadn't been exercised. You said they had no evidence, and I'm saying they can make a lot with a little evidence. They're much madder now because Trump is more evil in their sights, and they have a much better case that the system is stacked against them with the unrepresentative electoral counts for less populated rural states, the Senate. There's a whole paranoid theory that they're never going to get back into power because of gerrymandering, et cetera. And, it's not insane. So that just drives people berserk. I'm not saying the Democrats would be less manipulable. It's an open question. And I have to say that given some of the, what seems to me like overreaction to little bits of evidence in Russiagate and the endurance of the conviction that, even in the absence of anything approaching a smoking gun there, the endurance of the conviction that definitely, that was the Russians turned the election and so on. I have to concede. I mean, I got to say the whole, Russiagate, the whole resistance reaction to Trump and to Russiagate and the way that has played out up until now in the context of international relations, right? With the way I think that intensified left of center reaction to the Ukraine invasion, which again was something to get worth getting riled up about. It's an invasion, but the way the news about that is being processed. I mean, in general, my faith in the objectivity of people, such as it ever was, I guess, has been shaken. So I don't know that. It's an interesting question.
The weirdest thing I thought that I learned is when Trump, they asked him about the rioters, and he said, "Those are Antifa," how do you pronounce it?
Yeah, he was saying that afternoon.
That's very bizarre that early along he was producing this weird excuse-making talking point.
He couldn't have believed it.
He may just have been like making a sarcastic reference. I don't know who those are. Those are Antifa, but as opposed to actually saying it was a false flag operation. But it's just weird.
No, that was early. in the talking points. That was the first trotting out of that talking point by anybody on that side. Anyway,
it is damaging him much more than I expected. And I guess that's a good thing. Since I don't want it, except it's prompting him to jump in early and destroy the hopes.
But you think it makes it less likely, not just that he could win the general, but that he will win the nomination, right?
Yes, correct.
Well, then it is a good thing from your point of view, because it makes it more likely that the Republicans will win the presidential election, right? So why aren't you happy? Cheer up.
All I care about is stopping these 2 bills. I don't really care if a Republican is in the Oval Office or not. If the Republicans solidly control Congress, the 2 bills are probably not going anywhere. But so anyway, I might vote for, who knows? I might vote for a Democrat in 2024. I'm sure you're on tenterhooks.
On tenterhooks.
The Biden has COVID, and I think America is going to think, if that guy can survive COVID, I have nothing to worry about. And it's going to result in a huge relaxation of care in terms of, do we avoid this disease or not?
I don't know. He's pretty fit, right? He gets on a bike. He falls off the bike. He's pretty fit. He gets exercise. And, he's trim.
I would have given him points for the bike fall. I mean, he was on the bike. That's more than I've gotten.
Plus, if he didn't break a hip after falling, give that man a medal. Yeah, the COVID thing is funny. I mean, I'm about to travel to my family reunion. And, I got a booster that was timed for this purpose so that it'll peak. It's like been 3 weeks and I leave tomorrow. But I'm wondering if a booster does any good because, okay, so it is clear that vaccinations based on the original variant do protect you against the newest variants in terms of severity of illness, death, but don't do much to prevent transmission, to insulate you from transmission. And I wonder if that means that what's working is not the antibodies, but the T memory cells. And I think it's mainly the antibodies that get boosted by your booster. And I assume that the T memory cells are kind of there in the long run in any event. Maybe I'm wrong, but is your knowledge of this so deep that you can answer my question?
No, my knowledge is totally shallow and I can't answer your question.
But you recognize it as a good question,
yes,
right? You commend me for the question.
I commend you for it. We're waiting for better vaccines.
Well, they say, well, two things. I mean, they say that even the vaccines that'll based on Omicron, the first Omicron, which I think is the next new vaccine to show up, right, in the fall?
I don't know.
That they give you more protection against the newest variant than the existing vaccines do.
But isn't there an all variant vaccine on the way?
There is that third. Third round on the way, but I think it's not going to show up until after the Omicron vaccine shows up.
I had this very weird thing, which is I went to get my tire repaired to the tire shop, and the guy said, I can't fix it. All of my workers are out sick with the flu, not with COVID, but with the flu, which is completely bizarre because it's the summer flu season. I don't think so. Anyway, that's a little discordant data point. Everybody else is losing their workers to COVID, but I mean, not losing them permanently, but they're out. The Saudi trip, everybody's saying it was a failure. I didn't quite understand why it was a failure, since if the Saudis are going to send us more gas, oil, which I think would be the main goal of Biden in the trip, they're not going to announce it right then. I mean, that looks crude. They're just going to relax it like later on, right? So it might be a delayed concession. So we don't really know what Biden got out of the trip oil-wise. That remains to be seen. The other things are like, we failed to we showed that the Arab world wasn't scared of us. This is all from a Karen Elliott House op-ed. Waiting for you to cringe at the mention of the words Karen Elliott House? No?
It's almost a blast from the past. Is she still writing for their opinion?
Apparently, for the Wall Street Journal.
Not regularly, is she?
I don't think regularly. And that she says, well, the UAE was so unimpressed that after Biden left, they immediately restarted talks with Iran and to send back their ambassador. So the idea is that he showed he wasn't the man to stand up against Iran. I don't quite see that, but what do I know?
I just kind of wonder, like, how much oil, can they get? And if they're that desperate, why don't they just make nice with Venezuela and get some more there, make it easier for their oil to hit the market? They were making some kind of noises about that, but I don't think they ever did it. I mean, if this is just an all out, Venezuela, they don't chop up journalists.
Well, there's simpler things to do at home. You could, restart the shale industry, restart fracking, chop up the earth.
Chop up the earth.
I mean, During my sojourn in the fracking country, they were completely honest about them causing earthquakes. They didn't deny it at all. They said, you know, that earthquake in Texas, we did that. That was us.
You know, the Saudi thing reminds me again that I just really think this foreign policy team, it's just the amateur hour, because this may seem like a little thing, but like apparently they went to all this trouble to make it a fist bump instead of a handshake. And as people have pointed out, that looks worse. It looks like they're bros. They're the Bonesaw bros. It's, I mean, seriously, who is running this show that thinks that you look less chummy fist bumping a guy than
somebody made a big
hand?
deal of that. Somebody made a big deal of that.
It's obvious.
And then they put out a lie that it was because of COVID, but ignoring that he shook hands. He shook hands with everybody else. And and then he got COVID.
No, he had done he had done fist bumps in Israel, and at that point, the insiders were reporting, well, they're setting this up so he doesn't have to. See, initially the line was he's going to say he's not shaking hands with people because of COVID. Then he gets to Israel and he fist bumps them, doesn't shake their hand. Then he does the same thing in Saudi Arabia. It's worse than a handshake. Handshakes can look stiff and formal. Fist bumping can't.
Maybe it was worth a shot. I guess maybe not.
No, these people are complete amateurs. From Tony Blinken on down, they are not worthy of the job. And I rest my case on a fist bump.
It seems to me one other big topic is obviously inflation and will there be a recession? Today was looking very recessive. Larry Summers says it'll only be a little recession, nothing like the 2008 recession. It'll be like the the George H.W. Bush recession, which I don't even remember at all. There was one little one that helped elect Clinton, but it wasn't very big at all. So I'm hoping for that. And it seems to me the key issue is, the wages at the bottom of the scale have been rising, which seems to be the most important thing, at least the most important thing to me. And we could argue about why that is, but it's definitely happening. Even after inflation, I think, when all the average wages go down and overall wages go down, at the very bottom, things are better. And the question is, after the recession, will things still be better? Will there be a permanent repositioning of the value of unskilled labor versus skilled labor, which is something devoutly to be wished? I don't know, but it seems to me that's the key question: is when the economy comes back, do wages revert back to their old pre-COVID doldrums at the bottom, or
so you want unskilled wages to rise relative to skilled? That's the point. Yeah,
relative to everybody else. You want to raise the floor.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's easy, and Summers sort of never addresses that really. They always talk about average wages. I don't think he ever addresses the very bottom, at least in the things that I've seen.
Yeah.
There was this bizarre thing yesterday in the New York Times, the I was wrong day. Everybody had to write a column saying.
I missed it. I was just thinking about something I was wrong about, but I've conveniently forgotten. So what was it? What happened? Were people?
I don't know. Krugman wrote a column. I was wrong about inflation.
Yeah.
Which I haven't read, but I did reread Mike Kinsley's column predicting 10 years ago, predicting that there was going to be an inflationary price to pay.
And Krugman, didn't Krugman dismiss him with the back of his hand, kind of?
It wasn't quite that bad. Krugman wrote an actual argument against him. Then Kinsley wrote an argument back. Then Krugman dismissed him with the back of his hand, saying, well, I was thinking of saying that people shouldn't write about economics unless they know something about it or something. But it wasn't quite as bad as I had remembered it. And Kinsley was sort of right too soon. He was 10 years as opposed to 2 years.
And did Bret Stephens say I was wrong about the Iraq War?
No, he didn't. He didn't say I was wrong about immigration, which is what I wanted him to say. He said I was wrong to sneer at Trump voters. But that's a start. He said I was wrong to be a sneering elitist asshole. So
what should his attitude toward them have been?
Nailed it.
A polite dismissal?
Understanding but disagreeing, I guess, from his point of view, instead of dismissing them as yahoos and saying we want immigrants because they're better than these yahoos, which is
funny because he was brought into the Times op-ed page at a time when arguably the kind of conservative they should have brought in was a Trumpist. But because that was the moment when suddenly there's this new force. Is there an articulate version of it? You weren't getting much of that on the Times page. Ross Stout has an understanding of it, but doesn't.
He's resolutely anti-Trump. He's so resolutely anti-Trumpist that he can't.
Right.
I wrote a letter to James Bennett offering my services. Bob, did I get a response? No.
We talked about that in the Parrot Room.
Yeah,
I think part of our business model is we unveil our grievances a week early in the Parrot Room. If you want to hear them when they're fresh, you got to go to patreon.com/Parrot Room. If you want to wait until they're stale, fine. But I'm telling you, that one was a hell of a lot more entertaining last week.
But there were two obvious candidates, Byron York and Chris Caldwell, who would have been really good on the New York Times op-ed page, who they didn't go to.
Has York
they obviously didn't want an articulate Trump defender. That's
did York kind of convert to Trumpism, or could you have seen that coming? His sympathy for Trump.
He's I think less sympathetic to Caldwell. He just sort of defends Trump against anti-Trump bullshit. He's pretty clear-eyed about Trump. I think he too is happy that Trump is fading. He predicted Trump would fade. Caldwell, I think, is sort of somehow, the things I've read, seems a little more actually sympathetic. I think they both come about it honestly. I mean, York is in a job as Fox commentator where you don't have a whole lot of freedom of movement. But the answer is that if you had anti-Trump thoughts, you would sort of not state them.
We could always do what Jonah Goldberg did, which is quit Fox in protest, which he seemed proud of when we talked to him last week. But we can talk about that more in the Parrot.
But the other thing is, anyway.
So any other admissions of wrongness that are worth noting? I should check that out. What happened? Yesterday was a hellacious day for me. I was up until 10:30 p.m. podcasting on somebody else's podcast.
I don't understand the people who like Jonah Goldberg does like 10 podcasts a week. It's very bizarre.
They're just casual about them. It's an attitudinal thing. It's like, I'm going to show up. I'll do the best I can. I don't have to be on top of my game. But that's the way you should go.
It requires a level of articulateness that I am only able to muster at best once a week.
Well, he's younger than us too, but
he's very, very smart. But are you one quick thing maybe is this the Southern Poverty Law Center's attack on Andrew Yang was basically
I wasn't aware of it. What'd they say?
They had some attack on Andrew Yang. It amounted to you were at a conference with somebody who was at a conference with a bad person. Okay, so it's like we've almost reached the 2 degrees of separation. Pure argument. I mean, it was a little better than that because you were at a conference, but it was a huge conference, and he wasn't even on the same panel with the person. The Freedom Fest in Las Vegas. And this other person was speaking on a same platform with a bad person. Okay, they didn't necessarily say bad things, but it was the same platform with a bad person. But once they reach 3 degrees of separation, they'll encompass like half of humanity, right?
Yeah. Now it's crazy. This whole you were at a conference with. I mean, I've been at big conferences. One time this notorious guy walked up and shook my hand. I didn't know who he was. I'm just glad that this was before the age of smartphones when everybody had a camera. But I was at the same conference with him. Famous racist.
I was at a big conference with somebody who has a cancellation power came up and said hi to me. Yeah. If you go to a VDARE conference, you will be canceled.
Well,
And I think you're on more notice there. You're on more notice there that so many people have been canceled for going to VDARE conferences that
right.
you sort of know that that's going to happen, even if you say nothing offensive at all, as Darren Beattie did.
Yeah. No, it reminds me of. Do you remember? I mean, far be it from me to defend Charles Murray, but I did believe this point of attack was unfair when we were at the New Republic. And I think it was Chuck Lane who did this piece, looking up everyone in his bibliography. In Murray's bibliography and like what conferences they had been at. Like it's like when you cite a paper, you may know nothing about you know, who knows? It depends. You may have found it at the last minute, seems to support your argument. It's just I don't know.
I got into trouble once because I was doing exactly that, quickly looking in research for things that supported my argument, and I found one study that showed that welfare in fact did encourage people to move to states with high welfare benefits, which had never been, it was always a liberal dogma that this didn't happen, even though reporters on the ground like Jason DeBall could document the cars flying by from Illinois to Wisconsin for the benefits. And I said, oh, I don't know what his name was, but I said, oh yeah, and there's some guy named McCormick or something.
Some guy named Hitler.
Study. And I was at an academic study, and it turned out this guy was the leading sociologist in America who was revered.
Oh, well, that's the opposite problem.
And everybody thought I was a total asshole, which I was.
You mean for calling him some guy?
Yeah.
Oh, well.
It's like some guy named Albert Einstein had this study that showed, mass and energy, yeah, they can be.
We're starting to sound like old guys reminiscing, but just quickly,
that's part of our unique selling proposition. Bob.
I was talking to some people either at the World Bank or the IMF, and I said, it was a small group. It was like 30 people. And I said, yeah, there's an economist named Michael Kremer. And it turned out everybody looks at this guy and it's like, oh, you must be Michael Kremer. And I was like, I was wishing I was conversant enough in his work to be sure I had characterized it accurately. But
there's a paper out that says serotonin has nothing to do with depression, which I can't quite believe.
They mean causally or not even correlationally?
I think either. But
well, I'd have a much easier time believing that it's not causal than that it's not correlation.
Why is everybody on these serotonin reuptake inhibitors and they are happier?
That's my point.
It can't just be the placebo effect.
It could be that. It could be that this drug hits the real, the SSRIs hit the real mechanism that makes you less depressed. And it so happens that this category of drugs also has this totally unrelated side effect of raising serotonin, but I thought they had studies also showing that, people who undergo big elevation of status see their serotonin rise and stuff like that.
But that'd be different.
Yeah, but it's
curing depression.
Well, it's not. No, but the idea is that you get elected fraternity president, and in fact, this was a study at UCLA. Like getting elected fraternity president is like in the aftermath of that. Supposedly, you had a higher serotonin level than before. But this was a long time ago. I don't know.
That's at the upper end. That doesn't necessarily mean there's symmetry in it. That lack of serotonin causes low self-esteem. But anyway, the placebo effect is great. I want to get me some of that.
You want to get placebo effect?
Yeah. If I just become a religious person, does that give me a placebo effect?
That's not a
if
bad
I believe
metaphor.
It's helping me. I mean,
that's not a bad metaphor. I mean,
I think all of life is a search for the placebo effect, as you know.
That's an ultimately dark perspective, but then again, you're in a dark place.
We're dark.
So I'm not surprised, and I'm not disappointed.
I'm on message. I had one question about the monkeypox outbreak.
I'm your man. No,
it's not whether it's endemic or not. I mean, that's just a question of do we get it together or not. But why is it taken until now to break out of Africa? People have been going in and out of Africa for centuries. Presumably, some of them had homosexual sex with each other, which seems to be by far the main mechanism of transmission. And yet, it's new to the West. We didn't see people walking around with monkeypox.
I think we call this the role of contingency in history. I mean, it could have in principle broken out 20 years ago. It could, it's just at some point it happens that an individual is infected and then they have a kind of contact and the person they have contact with has contact with somebody, and then you reach critical mass. There's a tipping point with these things, and sometimes it reaches it and sometimes it doesn't. I don't know. I'm not shocked. That's life.
Not dark enough, Bob.
But speaking of monkeypox, look, can I complain about Joe Manchin again? There's actually no segue there, folks. The last week I complained. You had assured me that he'd be fine with taxing the rich. Wrong. Now this week we find out that there's another sense in which he's getting in the way of sensible tax legislation. The Biden administration had engineered this global minimum corporate tax, which I'm a big fan of, because it addresses the race to the bottom problem where countries competitively lower their corporate income tax in hopes of luring corporations, and corporations can always find their way around your tax by blah, blah, blah.
And amazingly, Janet Yellen negotiated a deal.
She did. 130 countries agreed to a 15% minimum corporate tax. That's amazing. And Manchin had apparently signaled that he's on board, and now he's changed his mind because I guess.
My general pitch is the night is a lot younger than you think, and that the press thinks. People looked at Manchin's statement on the reconciliation bill and noticed, smart Democratic people noticed it on his radio show in West Virginia. He did not say he would oppose all those elements of a reconciliation bill. He said he wouldn't vote for them now. So now they're going to pass this bill with the Obamacare fix and the drug negotiation. Medicare can negotiate drug prices. They'll pass that, but he hasn't ruled out voting for another reconciliation bill this year. So if they have enough time, and inflation doesn't give him an excuse to say no, he could go for that. It's not dead.
Does this mean
that's part of the nightmare of Mickey? They could also bring back amnesty and the child tax credit.
You're in a dark place. Does this mean that the climate change stuff that he also supposedly sabotaged could have a comeback?
That seems
less likely. That's a separate matter.
But that is the specific argument of these people who parse his statements in West Virginia, which is that could come back too. Well, but that seems like the least likely of them because he's from West Virginia.
Right.
I
predict that the global minimum tax will not come back just because, seize the moment, no time like the present, and you don't, and just shit happens, even if you don't mean for it to happen. Now,
I don't understand why they don't stick it in the current reconciliation bill. They stuck up a bunch of stuff in there, in addition to the Medicare and the Obamacare fix. Why can't they just stick that one? I guess it's a corporate tax hike, and Kristen Sinema doesn't like it. Maybe
could be, but it's such. As you know, I'm a fan of global governance, and people think when you say global governments, they think, oh, you want to address climate change and have peace in our time. No, there's a whole bunch of things a whole bunch of problems that can only be solved through international coordination. And this is a good example of if you want to tax corporations, if you don't want them to ultimately elude everyone's grasp, countries have to get together. And it's hard. And Janet Yellen did it.
It's one of those things that you think will never happen, and the fact that it happened means it should be rewarded. Yes, I agree.
I'm pissed. So what else?
I'm feeling Parrot Room time now.
Yeah, just about. I mean, we haven't said anything about Ukraine. Should I?
The British say the Russians are about to be exhausted, giving the Ukrainians an opportunity for a counterattack.
I have the quote. In fact, the head of is it MI6, the name of their intelligence agency?
I don't know.
Richard Moore says he believes Russia is, quote, about to run out of steam, end quote, in Ukraine. And it's certainly true that there has been a lessening of momentum since they took pretty much all of Luhansk. One province down, 2 to go in terms of Putin's minimal war aims of those 2 provinces in the Donbass. And, it's not entirely clear why. I think most people think it does have at least something to do with these HIMARS missiles we sent in. They've been disruptive blowing up ammo depots, some command and control centers, even some air defense installations. Most of this the Russians can adapt to. They can move their ammo depots further from the battle lines, but A, it'll take a little time, and B, there will be some enduring costs in terms of the efficiency of the logistics system, because more stuff will have to travel farther on trucks and less far on trains, basically. They'll need, more trucks, more truck time, and it's just sloppier. So the question is, to what extent is it just this, short time adaptation? And to what extent is it other things? I mean, I think the bad news for the Ukrainians is, again, the ultimate pool of manpower, sold people you can get in uniform. It's a much bigger pool for Russia. Now, both of them are at a stage where they've lost a lot of the good fighters. They have a lot of inexperienced fighters. And I guess the good news for Ukraine is it's harder to play offense that way than defense. And Ukraine is in the Donbass basically playing defense. But still, Russia is doing these various things to beef up their troop level without resorting to general mobilization. And they seem to be succeeding in getting more and more people in uniform, and even settling for minimal training. It takes a little while to get these guys up to the front, but this is still a long run problem for Ukraine. It seems to me is just sheer potential manpower.
Some commenters, probably these obscure commenters I read on John Ellis's Substack, said that it was considered bad for Russia that they had to go to Iran to ask for Iran's drones. They're Russia. They're supposed to have the drones of their own. People are supposed to be asking them for their drones. Instead, they're begging for Iranian drones. So that was a sign of weakness.
Well, I think Putin also wanted to just appear in public with some leader who would have him, and so you find some other leader that the U.S. has ostracized.
Well, he could have met. He could have met with them when not asked for drones. You think the drones? I don't think the drones was the excuse for the meeting, was it?
No, you're right. I mean, I think it was a dual purpose meeting. But sure. I think look, good drones that fire weapons are hard to come by. I mean, reconnaissance drones are easier to kind of just jerry rig, but and kind of the same with certain kinds of suicide drones maybe, but good missile firing drones, there's a limited number, they get shot down.
That's why I was I thought it was ridiculous. Did you see that video of the robot dog with a machine gun?
I know.
There's a video of a robot dog with a machine gun, and it's supposed to be scary because there's robot dogs running around shooting things. And there was a very influential tweet saying, "Oh, don't worry, it can only go for 7 minutes without running out of battery, and it has terrible aim. Look, it only hit the target one of every 20 times." Well, yeah, but the aim is going to get better, and the batteries are going to get better, and then it'll be time to be scared. I mean, how idiotic can a comment be? Eventually the drones will learn how to shoot. I mean,
it's going to be all robot dogs in the battlefield.
And why do they have to be dogs? I mean, is dogs like the most efficient way to run around? Couldn't you design something with 3 legs that would be faster, or 6 legs that would be more adaptable to terrain?
I think natural selection, contingency plays a role in natural selection, but I think it's pretty good at settling on fairly good solutions to problems. So if it has shown almost no preference for 3-legged runners, I think that means 4 legs is probably better in terms of sheer mechanics, but who knows?
Good point.
So yeah, you're right. It's Parrot Room time, I think. What are we going to talk about? First of all, I'm going to listen to this Jonah thing.
And give yourself 10 minutes to calm down.
You think? Does he talk shit about me? I mean, that'll piss me off.
He talks shit about you, but it's not that bad.
What can I just say in advance? Not having heard this at all, what a fucking dick.
Because he didn't do anything as bad as calling you a fucking dick. He says, I love Bob. He says, I love Bob, and then he gives a critique.
Okay, well, I love Jonah, but he's a fucking dick.
Okay. I think you like me are easily annoyed, and this will annoy you.
I'm already getting
there.
Man. I haven't even heard it.
Well, then I've raised expectations, so it's not going to meet your expectations.
I may retract what I said about him, but I'm certainly not guaranteeing it.
Okay, there's that. There's
what a dick. Go ahead.
There's let's see. I have Bill Gates throwing his money around. I have some ominous indications of the revival of the corrupt Washington of our youth. Dr. Oz versus Fetterman is interesting again.
Oh yeah, Fetterman wins an award for that. The award, the trolling of Oz.
What about how he lives in Pennsylvania?
Fetterman is launching
in New Jersey.
Fetterman is launching a petition to have Oz inducted into the New Jersey Hall of Fame.
Yeah, well, okay, that's an obvious one.
No, it's not. It's genius level.
Okay, if you say so. There's Jonathan Swan has a long Axios post on Trump's plans if he becomes president. They're both alarming and unexpectedly savvy. We can go into that. We have the WeWork where I have has a holographic. Is it like a box in the corner, and it's a holographic presence? So we can talk about the implications of that. You could be replaced by a holographic presence at any moment.
I'm game.
I have some comments on the general. I have some completely inchoate sort of like, have a child watch TV and see how he reacts. Comments on Joe Biden.
That'll take some unpacking.
It makes
no sense whatsoever.
And Fetterman.
Well,
like Mike Kinsley used to have a friend of his would have like a 5-year-old kid watch Crossfire, and he'd go, "Why is that man so mean to you?" Okay, that's like the basic or emotional reaction if you ignore all the substance to what was going on in Crossfire.
Okay.
So
you do your imitation of a 5-year-old watching Biden.
Correct.
Okay, good. Mickey imitates
watching. There's some other things that I can't understand. I can't read my own handwriting, but I'll figure it out. Oh,
okay. That's a lot.
There was an interesting Supreme Court case. Well, that's just for me, Bob. I'm sure you have
not that much. I want to discuss Ethan Hawke's plan for bringing peace to Ukraine. I know, sounds crazy, but also Lex Friedman's got a plan. He's there now. He's going to love bomb him.
Who is Lex Friedman again?
Oh, he's one of the big podcasters. He was anointed by Joe Rogan, who ceremoniously gave Lex Friedman his wristwatch, which is fraught with symbolism, on the Joe Rogan podcast. And that, it was like John the Baptist and Jesus, except kind of in reverse, because Joe Rogan is still the head honcho. But anyway, what else? Oh, I want to talk about, the Bonesaw Golf Circuit, the Live Tour.
Right.
And talk about the role of contingency, explain how the British Open may have flukily helped Live reach critical mass and could be the death of the PGA.
And Live is going to have Charles Barkley, too.
Well, they also picked up another good commentator. Is Barkley's going to be a commentator?
Oh, I thought he was going to be a contestant. I thought the idea was
not a serious contestant.
But they'll pay to see. People will pay to see Charles Barkley golf.
The guy who finishes last in their tournaments gets $120,000. So, I could become rich on that tour if they would just recognize that I'm an asset in an unconventional sense. But they have not recognized it.
It'd mean giving up the Parrot Room money. So.
Yeah, because that, I guess. Let's see. I don't have that. More stuff will come up. Maybe some commenter stuff, but this is enough. I mean, the Jonah Goldberg segment alone is worth paying for. So people should go to patreon.com/Parrot Room.
Well, the Jonah Goldberg segment actually raises issues, maybe not important issues, but sort of meaty issues.
Good.
Which
yeah, no,
I'm prepared to discuss semi-coherently.
Okay, this is going to be big. Patreon.com/Parrot Room. I can also mention my epic taping of an episode of Decoding the Gurus last night. That's the reason I'm low energy, except when I'm talking about January 6th. It's because that kept me up. So I'll write that down. The parrot is in a dark place, it looks like, Mickey.
Not dark enough.
Not dark enough.
And may get darker. We'll see, folks. There. And again, next week, we're taking a very rare, the two hardest working men in show business are taking a very rare vacation next week.